Adam,
Yeah?
is this an ad?
This is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modelling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You would never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's MUTINEX.co. It was that bad, right? And that's what then caused this incredible outpouring of positive media that went, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have to turn the comments off because of all this racist vitriol. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting. And I don't think that happens as much now. But what we saw back then was suddenly all these sort of very positive voices in the media came out supporting Cheerio, saying all they've done is shown how American families actually look today. So we got this incredible support from the mainstream media in America, which was really interesting. Hello, Adam.
Hey, Brent, how are you?
I'm good. As an advertising practitioner, Adam, do you think advertising people are any good at storytelling?
Well, you don't have to be that good at it because the story only has to last 30 seconds, doesn't it?
That's
It's more
true.
anecdote telling I think we're good at.
And what about character development? Are we good at that?
I don't know. I think we are. I think instinctively we actually can be really good at it because the character has to communicate a lot in a very short period of time.
Didn't you say to me the other day that character development advertising is casting?
It is.
And that's all it is?
It is. It
Yeah?
is.
Yeah, you're not backing away from those comments now?
No,
that we're on
I'm
air?
not.
No?
I'm
okay.
not.
Good, because we've got someone who works in the world of long-form storytelling. I used to work with Johnnie Ingram when he was at Saatchi & Saatchi, when he was a humble creative director. And now he's a showrunner in Hollywood, and he's got a fabulous show called We're Here, which is on HBO, among other things. And he's with us today on the pod. Johnny, hi. How are you, mate?
Hello. I'm very, very well. So great to hear your voice and see you, Brent, after all these years.
Yeah, man, you too.
And nice to meet you, Adam. You seem like a really nice guy as well.
Oh, Adam. Yes. There's that. Adam is here as well. Yes, pleasure, Adam. And thank you for having me.
Johnny, are you wearing a black T-shirt?
You know, I considered it. I definitely considered, but I'm actually squatting in an apartment in Santa Monica, and I have maybe two shirts, and this is black. So I got halfway there.
Black shirt. That's not bad. That's not bad. Now, Johnny, we like to go way back to the start and ask our guests what they were like at school.
Primary school.
Elementary
school.
as they say in America, yeah.
Well, that is definitely going back. I'm my only child, so I was used to getting all the attention. And so when I went to primary school, I didn't get any attention. So I was like, what the hell is up with this? I had to learn how to navigate people. So I think I was definitely more of an observer. And I think that's carried forward throughout most of my life.
Were you a fit in or stand out kind of guy?
Definitely behind, sort of not standing out. I did not. No. That was not my goal.
And you grew up in the South, right, Johnny?
Yeah, I grew up in East Tennessee, near where Dolly Parton was born. I always say from Dollywood to Hollywood.
Nice.
What a strapline.
Yeah.
And how was that, man? How was East Tennessee as a kid?
For me personally, East Tennessee is a beautiful mountains and hills and, Southern hospitality. And however, very conservative. I grew up, I am a gay man, an out gay man. And after I graduated high school, I decided I needed to leave the South to find myself and to be able to be myself. And I ended up moving to Chicago, in a metropolitan city, as often a lot of young gay folks do back in the time, to find their people. And that was, Chicago was a place where I also went to art school, so that helped me escape.
How does that experience relate to you now? Within that, it sounds like that wouldn't have always been pleasant, is what I'm hearing sometimes.
I mean, everyone has a life experience depending on how you're raised and where you're born, but in particular, so the South is very conservative, a Southern Baptist Christian faith, and the community is very much impacted by that. And still today, I would still say that it's the same. So it's really challenging, even going back to Tennessee as an adult. In fact, we actually just went back recently and filmed part of our television series there. I really want Tennessee to be progressive and to come around, but it's just not there yet. And I think that for me was the most challenging part, almost full circle moment for me this season on our show, was to leave, meet all these wonderful, amazing open-minded folks and bring them back to Tennessee.
I think we have to go straight to the punchline here, because you're the producer of a show and creator of a show called We're Here, which is, for those who don't know, or do you want to explain what it's about, Johnny?
Yeah, We're Here is it's a show. It's an unscripted television show. Actually, you may be familiar with the film Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. But it is they're derivative of that, between that and a mixture of other familiar shows. For example, Tu Wong Fu. There's a little bit of RuPaul's Drag Race, a little bit of Queer Eye. It's sort of a recipe of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's called We're Here, and we take 3 now famous drag queens into small conservative towns, and we put on a drag show, and it hopes to not only bring the local community together, but to tell stories of what it's like to live as a openly queer person or closeted queer person in these spaces. And I think the objective of the show, fun, but also highlight exactly where we're at in this moment. I mean, We're Here means many different things. Like, it's the present tense. It's also the fact that we have these 3 fantastic, fabulous drag performers coming to put on a show, and it shows the queer existence that already exists in these spaces that may not be as widely known. And I think on those different layers, the show, which we've been so grateful to win lots and lots of awards, it's funny, but it's also very heartfelt. But actually, unlike some reality TV shows, has brought a positive impact to these communities.
And how was it pitching that idea, Johnny? What was the reaction of? I mean, HBO ended up, taking on the show, right? But like, how was that when you were pitching it? When it was just an idea, was it easily understood? Did you have to sort of pitch it quite a few times to get people to understand it? Like, how was that process?
I always say right place, right time, right idea. And the idea actually started way back when I was in advertising. I mean, I have to give you credit for, opening up the door and allowing me to tell stories within our smaller short format space. In particular, we did a campaign for GLAAD that raised awareness around the gay men's blood donation ban, which was quite impactful. And actually today,
it's a great piece of work.
To this day, it's gone. So, I mean, it was the very beginning of that awareness campaign, working with the organization GLAAD, which was quite fantastic. And so I think these are all stepping stones to getting to what could be a great idea. And that for me was what I really wanted to do. Was also, I love making and telling stories, and I love making, and we did so much great work on Cheerios and Saatchi, and it was just so wonderful to have that momentum to keep telling stories. And I ended up, after working on the GLAAD project, I moved to Los Angeles because I was like, I needed to my West Coast fantasy and live that side of my life. And I was working and really wanted to get back to a community here. And I had this it was more of a documentary idea. It had nothing to do with drag queens. Mm-hmm. But it was about highlighting rural queer life in small communities. And nonetheless, next thing you know, RuPaul's Drag Race has taken over the world, and it took that idea and smashed it together with drag. And suddenly we had what advertising is taught, a sentence pitch. Yeah. As been so lucky to rub shoulders here in Los Angeles with a lot of high-powered people, it was literally pitched over dinner and drinks. And next thing you know, we're flying to New York to pitch it to HBO, and they bought it.
And do you think your advertising background made you better at that pitch? Because you spent a whole career, boiling things down to a poster and to 30 seconds. And do you think you're actually able to get to those ideas, articulate them in a way, you know what I mean? Was your advertising training helpful?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I've death by 1,000 decks. I've made so many decks that you get to the point where you can do them in your sleep. And what I learned in particular about selling an idea was less, yes, we have to get it down and I had a beautiful sizzle, a gorgeous deck,
of course,
a great idea. And, we were just, like I said, in the right place, the right time, with the right idea, and, executing that. Even though we are in a unscripted space, I actually wrote the first episode and what are the beats of the show. And I think the ability to tell stories, all kinds of stories, short, long. I mean, I think with branded content, you can see those worlds are not dissimilar at times. So an idea is an idea, and I think it was just really extraordinarily right, like I said, just lucky, but also all the hard work up into this point in my career and that landed me there just was, able to bring it to life. And I still pinch myself four seasons later, which is even more wild.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two key themes we're touching on already. One of them is this kind of element of diversity and inclusion, and obviously your story of growing up as a gay boy in Tennessee and now bringing that right back to the people of Tennessee is putting in their face is fantastic. I love it. Talk about that in a sec. Just on this concept of getting an idea, it sounds like both kind of industries, whether it be the movies and TV or advertising, the idea is paramount. And Johnny, you were an art director in advertising beforehand, right?
Correct.
What's different about those ideas? What's a good idea in the world of advertising versus the world of TV shows? How are those ideas different?
It depends. I think, and this is also, I think there's a huge opportunity here. I'll park that for a second, but I think an idea is an idea is an idea. I think I've seen commercials. I'm like, well, that would be a really great television series, and I've seen unstructured TV shows that should never have existed because it was just like nothing ever happened. But I truly believe what I've learned in advertising, instead of, in this case, selling a brand, I actually created a brand from the ground up. And I've actually done that in my advertising career. And it's a story, whether or not in particular it's all in one place in one format. Oftentimes when you're doing campaigns, you're telling little pieces of the story, some of the stories in print, some of the stories on television, some of the stories online. And that is, in some ways, a TV show if you put it all into one space. And, that said, I think, a lot of brands, particularly here in the US, were sort of eliminated from television, and, commercials and things sort of went more digital and social. But I think there's a huge opportunity as social has sort of become a little, what's the word? like a burning garbage bin of crazy. That there is a world of bringing back.
That's the word. That's the word. That's the word. That's the word.
Bringing back brands into longer format storytelling, in particular, not necessarily saying create production studios or anything like that, but what if we did, for example, a Cheerios television show, but not necessarily called Cheerios, but it was about the sentiment and the emotion of family, and it was centered around that. Obviously, Cheerios would be a part of a particular beat of that, but I think that's.
I hope you're pitching that to General Mills right now, Johnny. That's definitely a.
We are going to have to intertwine these two themes as well, right? Because you one of your Cheerios spots, as I understand it, cast a black kid with a white mum. It was an interracial family, and America went nuts, and not in a good way, about it. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
It was 2013. Picture it.
Pre-Trump.
So the world was great. No, it was, it was just the beginning of the internet and this open concept of everyone has a voice. And I think everyone's voice sort of culminated in the comments section of a lot of videos online and social media. And what we created was a very American story centered around a family when we were casting this Cheerios commercial, which was very wholesome. It's a very simple commercial. It's not really that complicated. And this little girl walked into the casting room, and it was mixed race, and she was incredible. And you're like, well, this is the girl. She had family members in the commercial, so we cast what was naturally her family, which was a white mother and a black father, and we told the story, and that was it.
You were obviously aware of that at the time.
Somewhat. We had a conversation. It was a very short conversation with the brand leaders about, what could possibly happen backlash-wise with this. And it really wasn't nothing we really thought would be a problem, as it was representative of the time. And so the commercial aired, and next thing you know, what was happening in these comment sections on YouTube was the white supremacists came out, and they came out in droves. And I don't think not much has changed since 2013. And our show is still, I think it's gotten worse, as I believe that a lot of these white nationalists and Christian conservatives have unfortunately invested in bots to multiply their voices to make it feel like this is a way bigger movement than it is, and it's actually impacting and creating fear in small towns, specifically around the queer, drag, and trans community. And their show is about squashing that. So, I mean, I'm still doing the work.
Same work. Important work.
Silence those wild, horrible, hateful comments.
Just a footnote on the Cheerios work, because I was obviously there with Johnny at the time, and it did cause this unbelievable.
Oh, you were there at the time as well.
Yeah,
no, right.
In New York, Adam.
I know, but I didn't realise that.
yeah, absolutely. Johnny and I worked together on it. The YouTube comments had to get shut down.
Yeah,
it was that bad, right? And that's what then caused this incredible outpouring of positive media that went, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have to turn the comments off because of all this racist vitriol. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting, and I don't think that happens as much now. But what we saw back then was suddenly all these sort of very positive voices of the media came out supporting Cheerios, saying all they've done is shown how American families actually look today. So we got this incredible support from the mainstream media in America, which was really interesting.
I think that's exactly what happens today. So I think that in the Olympics, which have just been, we had an Olympian called Ray Gunn. And she did this weird breakdancing dance.
Did you see that, Johnny? Did you see the Aussie breakdancer?
I missed that one. No.
There's a whole lot of really misogynistic comments that came out immediately.
Yeah.
And then the media picked up on all of those misogynistic comments and made it seem like it was much bigger than it was.
Yeah.
But now that that's died down, everybody is just raving about how brilliant it was that this woman came out with this kind of crazy new form of self-expression that nobody's kind of seen.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways it's a similar thing to that Cheerios thing where the truth will find a way.
Yeah.
It just has to bash through the bots.
And have you found that with your show, Johnny? Have you found that? Like obviously, I mean, how was the reaction when you first launched?
I mean, it was pre-pandemic, so it was definitely a different world even then. And in particular, it was about bringing in showcasing drag at its sort of most highest level. And actually, we had an incredible, generous budget, and we even made a driving purse that kind of drove into town. It was like we were really having a lot of fun. And it was sort of a spectacle of what would it be like with this grand, celebratory drag personas that typically, most people would see on a pride float and, in the month of June. What if we brought that to the small town and see and show that, a lot of folks that maybe were a little misinformed or maybe wanted to have some tough conversations about their queer family members or friends, this was the time. And we could also unite the local community who tends to hang out in silos. And that was really what happened. And then, the last episode of our very first season, which is, imagine, creating a show, finally doing something that is a dream even beyond your wildest dreams. And then right while you're filming your last episode of the season, the whole thing gets shut down and you all have to fly home. And we all created that last episode like this, like sitting in front of my computer. We filmed it, edited it, the entire process sitting at home, which now I think has now become a lot easier since then. But at the time, no one had ever done it before. And we were one of the very first, if not the first, COVID episode to air on television.
Wow.
And after that, the political climate significantly shifted, and our show has now become insanely political, and that's not a part of American history because we're highlighting what has now been a lot of hateful vitriol spreading across the country and used in political attacks against not only our community, but hopefully gain unfortunate conservative momentum for change. And, I think we have to, as we have had scream as a minority group before, we have to get even louder.
The safety of your cast and crew must be paramount, right? Like you couldn't take them to a Trump rally, could you?
In this fourth season, the final episode of the season, we actually get shut out of an entire town. Like an entire town will basically says, do not come here. And even the local LGBTQ organizations like, please, I'm so afraid for not only for you, but it's not safe here. So
wow. Where was that in the country?
This is a place called Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Right.
Which is in smack in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And we actually ended up staying in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because in order to produce these shows, you have to get permits to film. And we got the general permit, which is our First Amendment right to film on the streets of Bartlesville. But outside of that, no one else would talk to us except for the local newspaper journalist, who was there was only one. It was a very small newspaper. And, in documentary storytelling, it's really tough if you don't have your subject matter on camera, then there's no story. You need people to interact, and we need people to sit down with us, and no one would talk to us except for this journalist. And, we were actually quite unsure what we were going to do, because we wanted to put on, this is literally right before we had already approved people were going to sign up to do the show. We were ready to do the performance in this small town, and then everything just started crickets. We weren't getting any feedback whatsoever from any of the contributors. So it was pretty scary. And then we had to make a judgment call, what are we going to do? So we actually decided to try and almost become more investigative journalists. We enlisted our one journalist, and we found one gay guy who was willing to talk to us, who lived in the outskirts of town. And we kind of started to learn that it really was a group of we called them Warriors for Christ, who were basically bullying small businesses that had drag shows in the past into not doing drag shows ever again. And in particular, they had a pride event in the park, in this really amazing park where these Warriors for Christ showed up, and it was, I guess, considered very, very ugly.
Wow.
And then, so thus we actually this is where my advertising career comes back into play. We decided to cancel the show, but we decided to run a full page ad in the local newspaper explaining that we were going to cancel the drag show based on the political climate. However, if anyone wanted to come and meet a drag queen, say hi, extend an olive branch, whatever it is, you're confused about the political climate, anything, we're going to do a meet and greet instead. So it's not a full tilt drag show, and we're going to do it in the park. And so this ad was also accompanied by an article by the journalist, who didn't typically have a lot to write about in this small town. It was the most shared article in the history of the publication and in this small town. And we did the meet and greet, and not without spoiling it. It was chaotic. He also exposed, so to speak, the man behind the curtain, and it was one man, or a couple others. But it was but basically that was, the story. The lesson here is the fear really is the goal of a lot of these organized, hateful folks in these comment sections. But the love outnumbers the hate, and I think that's something that we really, wanted to show that.
Even in a town like that, the love ends up outnumbering the hate. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it was true. Like there was outside of that, maybe say it was two protesters at our event. We had hundreds in this small town, like hundreds of people showed up in support. And it was actually beautiful. Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah?
Is this an ad?
This is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modelling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You would never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS. Your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co. And that unscripted nature you just talked about, like we planned to do a show and we couldn't do a show. So that must really test your creativity, right? Like you come from a world of advertising where it's very scripted, it's storyboarded, it's very structured, we know what we're doing. And now you're in a world where unscripted, anything can happen. Do you find that more creative? Do you find it liberating, or do you find it terrifying? I mean, how does that sort of work?
Oh, it's both. But I will say, learning to pivot. I always find in advertising, you're just ideas. You have so many ideas. Obviously, you got to curate and find which ones rise to the top. You have creative directors to help sift through your many ideas. What happens on set and unscripted is I'm following the story in particular, and in each individual contributor, and depending upon what the show is about, you just sort of see what and you talk to your story producers on what kind of conversations are happening. In this show, we have a large, long thread that encompasses a theme across, in this case, 3 episodes, and you have contributors that come in and out throughout. So I just sort of keep an eye on what's happening, and in what particular happened in this arc was nothing was happening. So like I say, when nothing is happening, we don't have a show. So we have to figure out, without moving the needle, because it is documentary, it has to still within the realm of the stories and the concept that we came up with, and authentic, what works. And in this case, it was using the people and the contributors and cultivating, okay, we still have to have some show of sorts in this particular space. We ended up having the larger show in a Catholic church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was also controversial. Nonetheless, the meet and greet was the way to manifest the story of the ghost town, or the town that ghosted us, so to speak. And you have to think through what is the next story point. And I think you have to kind of, in some ways, ignite the voices within this community to talk to you, because no one would talk to us. And the only way to do that was to show on a full page Johnny Pink newspaper ad that we're canceling our show because the political climate here, it was a very kind gesture, as not only did we contribute, $1,000 for this ad, this local newspaper, but it was really about extending an olive branch to anyone and everyone. And it was kid friendly, that wanted to meet a famous drag queen.
You've had an amazing career and an incredible kind of transition from working in advertising and working on lots of different brands and creating ideas for them, to going out on your own, creating your own idea, your own brand, as you will. The brand itself that you've created has very, very clear ties back to your own personal experiences and so forth. And there's obviously there's a lot of passion when you talk about the show. What advice could you give people who have an idea and it's born from personal experience and they want to get out and do their own kind of thing with it? How does that happen? Can you just help us understand that a little bit?
It's just not my experience is to make it happen. I think that a lot of times people will sit on an idea or feel it's not good enough, or go through your deep creative insecurities, and question yourself, or question whether or not you. And I still do that. I still have a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? Why am I accepting this award and all this sort of stuff? It sort of can really impact your confidence. And I think a lot of people doubt what they're capable of. In particular, I know I did it for myself, but I think when you're actually put in the position and you have the tools to lead folks, I also found that this idea is so much bigger than myself. And it's actually a whole group of really talented, amazing people to bring it to life. I have to give my idea away to a lot of other people and inspire them and make them feel like it was theirs, because, and most importantly, we're all making it, and it takes an entire life of its own and becomes something, like I said, way bigger than me, way bigger than my partner who, we co-created this, way bigger than our director, way bigger than our cast. And it has actually become more of a movement, and for a lot of these folks in a small town that want, in particular, to create change in their communities. And it's I think it is just get it down, get it on paper, and show it to people. If we weren't sitting great with, obviously a high-powered individual and had this idea in a sentence pitch and just riffed it over a drink, and this whenever would, I wouldn't be here.
What was the sentence pitch? And was it about your personal experience, or was it more about that movement back when it first started? Oh,
it definitely started as a personal experience, because I worked in drag bars growing after I left Tennessee and moved to Chicago. So that personal journey, in particular, my mother would come to visit, and we weren't really talking about my queer identity. I took her to one of these drag shows, and she had a great time. And the fun part was, it was so disarming, and suddenly we were just talking about all the things I was afraid to talk about. She was suddenly asking questions and suddenly engaged, and I was like, wow, what if we brought instead of her coming to the drag show, what if we brought the drag show to my mother or people like my mother and told stories? And actually, getting into drag for some people is harder than others. I think also showing the nerves behind that, and even knowing myself, putting on high heels and a wig and a dress would be hard for me, especially at that time. And then talking about that emotion and and those feelings. And I think there were so many other things that I learned through this process too, about how drag impacts all kinds of folks, whether you're trans, whether you identify as non-binary. I mean, there's just it's a really great, fun, artistic self-expression that kind of helps you discover who you are as a person. And then I think when we developed the pitch, and it was never that, because that's stuff we discovered when we were making the show, but the pitch was simply taking 3 famous drag queens into small conservative towns and putting on a one night only drag show. And that was enough. Very fish out of water, very simple, familiar, yet never been done in this particular way.
Very crisp how you articulated it, and you can see how you've carried that idea all the way through. It's still that core idea. It's such a great article. I think it's really interesting. I actually think that it's something agencies need to be better at, is being able to articulate ideas. You just articulate that so crisply, Johnny, right?
And somebody once said to me, there's only 2 types of stories. The second one is a stranger comes to town.
Yeah, fish out of water.
It was, and the first one, I forget what the first one
Hero's
was.
Journey? Hero's Journey?
No,
I don't know. Well, no, I'm really glad you offered that up, Adam. Hey, Johnny, you just mentioned before how you give the idea over to other people who then collaborate with you and help make things. Obviously, a career in advertising is all about that. You hand an idea over to a client, right? And you're so beholden on the client to approve the idea, not mess with the idea, protect the integrity of the idea. Do you feel you have more ownership of your ideas now in the world of television than you had in advertising, or less control over your ideas?
I have to say, what I've learned, and this is a very specific HBO shout out. HBO it gives you complete freedom to fail. And I think if you fail, that's on you. If you succeed, you get another season. So it's very much about, your reward is you get to keep making this great show that you created, but you don't want to fail. And I think there's a lot of trust at a very specific position. If the creative isn't good, they're not going to put it on air. So there's that.
It's like good pressure when you work with HBO.
It's good pressure, but I think there's a lot of trust. Obviously there is a notes process, which I thought was a kinder way to generate a dialogue, especially with a brand or a client. I was like, wow, I'd like the notes process, because notes you can think about them, but you don't have to honor them.
How does it work?
And HBO will say, well, I mean, basically you send over a package and they'll send you notes and you can look at them. So, okay, I can see that, or I don't know, that was not a big deal. You can kind of work through what notes you think actually do apply to the creative. And if you decide to ignore a note or say, this note isn't that valid, then you have to sort of take that risk and put yourself on the line. That I think that note is a good note, but I don't think it's necessarily correct here. Instead, I think we should do this, or I think we should keep it the same, and you put yourself on the line. And I think
who's writing the notes?
HBO executives, right?
Yes,
writers,
exactly.
Screenwriters, or
no, it's executives. Yeah, so executives, in some ways, I would compare it to like a client, but they're buying your show, and they're buying your show because they think certain eyeballs that they have in their streamer or on their network will watch. Or invite new potential eyeballs to your show. And I think that notes process, and oftentimes it comes from a really strong experiential place, and it's really important. But at times creativity, as we all know, is a huge risk, and you can't guarantee any of it. And I think the more small bets you make, the more, I think we did this a lot with you, Brett, the more small bets you put out there, something's going to take off. And I think that's really, I think I still live by that, is have lots of really great small bets and hopeful that one thing that you let it flourish will be
just to unpack that just a little bit more. So you're sort of saying maybe in the creation of advertising, if it was more like notes as opposed to approvals, maybe we might get to a better place. Yeah.
Yes. Because approvals, obviously at some point you have to approve it because it has to get to air. Or obviously there are fees and stuff that start to pile on if you can never get something approved. But I think a notes process is it's kind in some ways. It's not as like, oftentimes you get feedback emails, you end up in this space of like, everyone's always reacting to like, so quick to react to the feedback. And then it's like, well, if it's a note, it's sort of, okay, I see where, it's a conversation.
That's interesting.
Speaking of kindness, what we like to do with our guests is take their piece of work and put it into the pub test. So it's basically taking your piece of work, taking it down to the local pub and asking people what they think. We use a research company called Ideally who help us organise all of this. So we showed them the trailer for We're Here.
Okay.
And and we put it to the pub test, and let's have a listen.
The pub test is brought to you by Ideally, the insights platform where ideas go to grow.
I'd absolutely watch this show. It looks like it's inspiring and hopeful in this current climate where there's just so much hate going around, and it looks so inspiring to see people living authentically and chasing their sense of belonging.
Probably not. I enjoyed that it exists.
Yeah, I definitely would watch this show. I mean, stuff like Paris is Burning and that whole film community around the plight of, queerness is always very inspiring to watch, and especially, a different take. It looks like something I would watch.
I absolutely think it looks entertaining. I'd definitely watch it.
It does look entertaining. I think it's a very meaningful thing to document and to show, especially in a place that seems as sort of outwardly divided as the United States.
It also, I'm sure, would shed a bit more light on the kind of situation in America. I've heard about the drag ban and all of that stuff. So yeah, I'd be interested in learning a bit more about it.
I think this show would appeal to everyone, unless you're anti-queer.
Anyone who's an ally in that space, people looking to learn more about what's going on in America, why they're losing their minds.
I think it's good for these stories to be told. There's never a bad time to show different walks of life in as sort of many ways as possible.
I think it's really important to share stories, to be inclusive of LGBTQIA+ community, because you can't be what you can't see, and sharing their stories, it's really beautiful to fight hate and fear and put something positive out there so it can help people understand.
Awareness is a big one, and I guess showing the human side to a story that can be so politicized so quickly.
I think this definitely passes the pub test. I would 100% watch this.
I think it as an idea does. I think the trailer itself really didn't have enough narrative to it, so it's a soft yes.
Yeah, this passed the pub test.
That's about the most positive thing we've done.
That's a positive pub test right
there. Give me the name of that pub. I'm just
Before we all congratulate ourselves a little bit too much, I've just got a bit more kind of insights here from Ideally. The We're Here trailer scored above average in distinctiveness, but fell short in likability compared to benchmarks. So that's what it said. And then there's another question here. Do you think the TV show would help increase understanding and acceptance of drag culture in conservative areas? One person said yes. It's just showing their side of things, hopefully aids comparison and understanding to accept, even if totally different to the norm. The other person said not really. Conservatives would not watch. The only viewers who would be those who are interested in that lifestyle anyway. Kind of interesting. So I think everyone's kind of saying, yes, it's good that it's happening, but maybe not for me. But it's obviously rating really well. So
What do you think, Johnny? How would you respond to that pub test?
We're in a different world now. It's not where we all watch the same television and occasionally you have appointment viewing like the Olympics and, and football games and et cetera. But, it is now a world where you can live in a silo or a bubble and watch only things that you want to watch, and you can pick and choose. I'm hopeful that the people that, in particular, that didn't find it necessarily interesting to watch, maybe one day they'll have a family member or a colleague or someone that comes out and they want to understand them better. Then we have this resource that's, available, that's also entertaining. And I think the folks that love drag and that love storytelling and in particular crying, our show is very heartfelt. And we're known for a roller coaster of emotions. I feel very fortunate. We've won more awards than I could even ever have imagined for this series, and I think means something so personal to me, and the fact that we've been able to create it and make it, and no one can ever take that back. And I think that's something to me that is, the creative person is the most important thing. Is you get one person who outreach and tells you that this show saved their life. I don't need to hear anymore.
And Johnny, on the heartfelt piece, when it's real and unscripted, do you think it gets to a different level of emotion versus something that's scripted? Like, do you just think it's more raw and authentic, and you couldn't script it? Is that how you sort of feel about it?
Authenticity was critical. I mean, there are different types of reality shows. I've seen shows where they actually edit pieces together and they show it to a contributor and they make them then talk about it, and it's all basically made up soap operas. In this case, we don't want to move the needle too much. So really what it is just creating scenes and asking questions and having a dialogue, and the real families are sitting down and talking about things they haven't talked about ever. And so that real raw emotion is happening while we're there. But at the same time, if we weren't there, these conversations may never have happened. Mm-hmm. Our director came from the show Intervention. If you've seen that show, but this is like in some ways they call it a queer intervention. But intervention is about when people sit down around someone who is suffering or from addiction. In particular, you have a really tough conversation. This is not that, but it is a tough conversation around queerness and however you identify. And we talk about all in this particular season. We have different aspects of queer life, whether you're trans. We have an intersex story, which is quite beautiful and very difficult to tell. It also goes into deep conversations about fascism and how it's these small communities are breeding grounds for these laws that are now being workshopped to take over in conservative leadership in this country. So this show is very multifaceted and it covers a lot of different topics, and including, just rural queer life. Being that we're on HBO, we want to keep our intellectual audience stimulated, and therefore show them all different types of stories and intersectionality and how that plays out.
I firmly believe that reality TV is the best behaviour change instrument we've ever developed to change people's behaviour en masse, and it's completely underrated for that purpose. It's the only thing where you can show loads and loads of people an overall narrative, get them involved with it. You can gamify it, you can model appropriate behaviours, you can give them tools and techniques on how they can then change their own behaviour. And it's wonderful to see, and it's also obviously entertaining as well. So it's fantastic to see you kind of harness the power of that in such a creative, fun way for a good cause.
Yeah, wow. I'm going to ask a really trivial question after that deep question.
Yeah,
sorry, go, Johnny. Go, Johnny, go.
No, I was just saying the emotion then, it culminates at the very end as we do the drag show, and the drag, like in some ways borrowing from your karaoke song, I'll use it as your favorite karaoke song, but putting the emotion and the story behind it and do that. It's a lip sync, so you don't have to worry about singing unless you do have a singing voice, but then you manifest all that emotion and storytelling, and we then put together with an insanely amazing, talented wardrobe, makeup, and creative team with the drag performers to execute that performance. And then this is the part where the real creative challenge is, how do we take the story we just learned about this person and land it epically, and that's, we're doing that all on the fly, and people are making costumes in very, very, very short periods of time. And it's an emotional roller coaster, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera.
You know why I like Ideally, Adam?
Why, Brent?
It's fast. You get insights overnight. And I think the main thing is it's not trying to test whether an idea should live or die, but it's trying to give you real insights that you can build on and make the creative better.
That sounded like an ad.
Because it was.
Do you know why I like Ideally?
Why?
Because they sponsor the black T-shirts.
They do.
If you want to do a pub test on your own, don't. Go to Ideally instead.
That's right. Visit goideally.com. That's goideally.com and find out how they can help. Johnny, who cares more about awards, advertising people or television people?
That would be a tough race, but I will say advertising.
Wow.
I think there is a certain... I know.
Wow.
I'll say it. I think that of course, awards do great things in Hollywood. However, a popular show, they often get awards for being popular. And I find that that's not always the case in advertising.
True.
No, it's true.
Interesting.
And what about the financials of making a show? If you do one successful show on HBO, are you rich? Like, how much money do you make?
That's a. I think it.
Why don't you ask it slightly differently?
I've learned-
Hang on,
No. I've asked
no.
my question. I've asked my question.
There is. I mean, I will say the money exists in intellectual property, right? It's like the art world. I'll compare it to the art world. You need when you have an agent and a lawyer. If you're an actor, it's priceless, right? It's priceless work unless you have the reputation, a good lawyer. Which I do, you can do pretty well. So I am grateful and I'm doing okay.
So are the financials transparent? Is it easy to work out?
They are not transparent, no. There's only a few folks, in particular the networks. I think the lawyers sort of know, people who know what numbers are crunching across the industry, they can give you a better, well-throated answer. The creatives are, I find, probably similar to creators in advertising. Like, I don't know, pay me whatever I'm worth, but you have people negotiating for you. And you have people negotiating for you, then it's, it turns into something completely different. And my partner is also an entertainment lawyer, so I do know a few things about
That's handy.
that
That's
world.
good.
Super handy. Now, Johnny, you've got a successful show, and I'm sure there's many seasons left in the show. But what's next, man? Do you do another show? Do you do something else? What's next for you? After this?
Funny you mentioned it. We have another show already. It's called Swiping America. It's a dating format where we take 4 New Yorkers, successful in life, unsuccessful in love, go on a dating adventure across the country. And it's kind of, in some ways, where East meets West or Red meets Blue. And it's a beautiful series. We actually were nominated for a Critics' Choice Award and a GLAAD Award for that. It's a queer inclusive show as well. Currently, a really good friend told me that off the heels of selling this show, to have 5 ideas in your back pocket ready to, at any moment, to pull out. And so I just been developing. I have actually 10, maybe 15 ideas in my back pocket currently developing. And I love the idea, too, of potentially, I think the golden era of advertising could return once the streamers invite the advertisers back to a very comfortable, well-earned space versus the, don't get me started with the internet and of it all, but I think there's a real deserving, I think, streamers have ran off the advertisers, in particular commercial advertising, and I think it really is an opportunity to bring them back into streaming spaces.
In Australia, we have a TV show here called Gruen, and it's about advertising, and
Adam's on it, by the way, Johnny. Adam's on it.
But it's been running for 16 years.
Yes.
And it's a very, very, very high rating
So
show.
how much money do you make?
Don't be so rude. Come on. That's inappropriate.
Oh, touche.
But the creator of the show, a chap called Andrew Denton, just says he can't believe that nobody else has come into the space, because advertising is so much about reflecting popular culture and creating the culture we live in. And he's just amazed that there's just very little out there on advertising. Mad Men was massively successful. There's very little out there. And so anyway, if you want some shows in your back pocket.
Yeah, but
I have a pitch.
Yeah,
I'll
great.
show you. But Johnny, I think you weren't suggesting so much a show about advertising. You were more suggesting that brands come.
He was, but
were you suggesting like that brands and advertisers make content for for the streaming environment, right? Is that where you're going more with that?
Yeah, I know, what I've learned about the business of Hollywood and the business of advertising is they're very similar, but they don't understand each other, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if there were a world where a bridge like myself that could that understands both worlds. I mean, I will use Barbie, for example, as an extraordinary example of a brand that has created an incredible hit film.
Yeah.
But I will say the scripted space takes a long time. It's very risky. It's complicated, and it can take a lot of time, in particular, more time than a lot of these marketers even stay in these positions. But the unscripted world is very quick, and you can go from idea to execution to being on air in honestly the same amount of time as you can with a commercial, if not sometimes less, depending upon the type of show you're making. So I think there's a huge opportunity as well to have a brand idea or a brand purpose live through the art of storytelling in longer format on streamers, and especially in the streaming wars, and in a time when I think streamers are trying to find more value in their television shows. I think they need to talk more to each other.
So, Johnny, at the start, I called you a showrunner because I feel like that's the cool thing to call yourself if you've got a show on Netflix. I'm interested in what you call yourself now. Are you a creative? Are you a writer? Are you executive producer? Are you all those things? What do you call yourself these days?
It's definitely, I think what I've learned in this world is the more value you can add to your set, the better. But I am actually not a showrunner. We have a writer credit for the show. We have an executive producer credit. And I also have a director credit for for an episode. And that's also, I did all the graphics as well for the show.
On his Wikipedia page, it just says Johnny Man About Town is how you've described yourself.
That's a different side of me. No.
Hey, Johnny, to wrap up, mate, we like to ask our guests if they could sum up their creative philosophy and put it on a black T-shirt. What would your black T-shirt say, Johnny?
That's a good question. I need to think about this for a second. So my black T-shirt, I would say make lots of things.
Make lots of things. Love it.
I mean, it really is. I mean, I tell people that a lot. Just make lots of things.
And in what type, mate? I'm sure you'd be very particular about the type, and it would be
Comic Sans.
yeah. Well, I mean, Comic Sans is now. I mean, this it made a huge comeback. I would say I'm a Futura fan. So forever Futura.
Forever Futura.
Yeah, you'll actually see that. You'll see that in the graphics.
Which you did. You did the graphics as well. You did the graphics as well. Johnny, it's been awesome, man. It's been great having you on our humble show. It's nothing compared to your show.
If you want to do a TV show about some bumbling podcasting folk who make it big in the big smoke, we're here. We're around.
Yes.
We're here.
Yeah. Well,
nice.
There you go.
Yeah,
nice pun. We're here. Yeah. Very good.
Well, we got the spinoff. They're there.
Very good. Johnny, good on you, mate. Great to see you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
It's been great, mate. Good on you. Be well. Adam, there's hope for us advertising people yet.
In what way?
We can come up with ideas like that and have hit shows.
How?
Well, like Johnny said, make lots of things, have lots of ideas.
It's funny that he said that because his show was so inspired by his own personal journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, like how much insight and how much passion you get if the idea is born from your own lived experience in some way. But then if you couple that with having lots and lots of ideas, then you're covering your bases as well.
I think it was a great example of how to very crisply articulate ideas. I think anyone I've met in the world of television who has successfully created shows, they're able to sum the idea up so succinctly and clearly.
They're better at it than advertising people. Advertising people still struggle to sum up their idea. They can get a tagline, but ask them to summarize their idea and they'll start talking about execution.
It's really powerful.
TV folk, I think you're absolutely right. I think they can crystallize the idea. In fairness, though, lots of the ideas are derivative of other ideas. And so they kind of say it's a bit like
take a bit of this, take a bit of that.
X meets Y or whatever. Whereas in advertising,
but isn't that interesting?
We hate being derivative.
Correct. We originality, and there's nothing good about being derivative.
That's right. Yeah. And we make it harder for ourselves because then the human, the viewer, whatever you call them, the audience, consumer is the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Has to deal with a whole new concept. Whereas I think one of the reasons why TV is so derivative is because we don't like things that are shockingly new. We like things that are familiar yet new.
And Johnny said it too. Like in the world of television, they reward popularity.
Yeah. Whereas in advertising, I think I may have mentioned this before, but Ted Horton, one of my favourite creatives, says of advertising agencies, it's not that other agencies can't do what I do. It's just that they can't bring themselves. They just can't bring themselves to do what I do.
I think the other really interesting thing that I loved was when Johnny talked about the difference between notes and feedback or approvals.
Beautiful.
Wasn't that interesting?
It was really interesting. I like the way you teased it out. It's about notes, not approvals. There's obviously something in that for all of us, isn't there? With our relationships, not only with clients, but also internally. If you're giving feedback, you're giving notes.
The key I love the way you talked about the kindness of a note. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
I wonder if that's an HBO culture, or I wonder if that's because it doesn't feel like that's.
Well, and
LA.
Talk about a track record of developing incredibly successful shows and stories. HBO, they're the best at it. It's quite interesting that that's how they approach the development process.
Notes, not approvals.
I've got some notes for you at the end of this show, by the way, Adam.
I've got some approvals. All right, good on you.
Cheers.